Matatia turamatia, te tuapapa o mate matatu Aotearoa. Ki runga, ki raro, ki uta, ki tai, koia ko te manakitanga, te whanaungatanga, te pono me te whakamana i te ako. Homie, huie, dai ki e. E te ti, e te tā, e ngā iwi katoa. Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai ki tēnei piringa Rauhuia, ki tēnei Huihuinga kōrero whakatau mai rā ki tēnei Terenga. Ko Kim Bonington toku ingoa, ko o tētahi o ngā tohutohu mātua mo te matatu Aotearoa. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Kim Bonington. I am a teacher and I am one of the senior advisors here at the Teaching Council. The introduction to ngā tikanga matatika ngā paerewa, our code, our standards, recognises the influence that we as teachers have on shaping futures and the contribution we make to society by supporting young people to realise their potential and prepare them for the future. Artificial intelligence, however, is no longer a futuristic concept. It is a tool that our learners, their whānau and teachers are using for a range of purposes and in a range of contexts. The Council wants to ensure that we support teachers and leaders as they guide their students on their learning journey in a way that enhances the use of the tools, but also keeps them safe. We hope that this Symposia series introduces you to the many and varied uses of AI in education settings. It has been designed to engage you in reflection with your colleagues about how it is used at your place to support teachers and enhance teaching and learning in a manner that inspires, supports, and models good practice for our young people today, tomorrow, and in the future. No mai kia piri, no mai kia tata, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It is now my pleasure to welcome Claire Amos to speak to you today. Claire is the principal at Albany Senior High School. She has worked for a variety of schools and educational organisations in her 25-year teaching career. This has included working in a number of new and established secondary schools, as well as working on various national education projects. Claire was a founding member of the Education Council of Aotearoa and is currently a board member of NetSafe NZ. She is also a member of Global Women New Zealand and co-founder of Disrupted NZ. Kia ora everyone, Claire Amos.
Kia ora, and welcome to everyone who has joined us this afternoon. It's a huge privilege to be invited to present to you today. And I'm looking forward to joining the conversation and very much joining the conversation, not as an expert, but as someone who is a passionate learner in this space and someone who is hugely curious. So without further ado, tēnā koutou katoa, e rau rangatira mā. No ingarini o ku ka mātua, ko kawo toku wahi mo tuhaki. Ke tamaki makaurau ahau e noho ana. Ko Simon toku hoa rangatira, ko Hannah Raua, ko Emily a Maua Tamariki. Ki o kahukura mātua ahau I mahi ana. He tumuaki ahau ko Claire Amos toku ingoa. No rewa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So as Kim kindly outlined, I have been an educator for I think what's actually probably closer to 27 years now. I have spent my career as a drama teacher and an English teacher. And it was back in 2010 when I was lucky enough to have a Ministry of Education e-fellowship that my career diverted into the space of e-learning. And I undertook action research at that stage, looking at how online spaces could be used to improve literacy and engagement, particularly in the context of Māori and Pacifica classrooms. And I think that began what has become a lifelong love of technology and a lifelong commitment to being a learner in this space. I think it is really important that we take every opportunity to learn as much as we can and to engage with these tools, because we know they can be incredibly powerful and positive. We know they can amplify the good practice that is going on already, but that is only going to happen if we proactively engage with the technology and do what we can. And so today I am going to attempt to do a bit of an overview of AI in education in both the global context and our local context here in New Zealand. And once again, I really want to stress that I'm not coming to you as a computer scientist or as a particular tech expert. It's more as an educator who is passionate about this topic and genuinely interested. And I was talking to a friend this morning about what it's like to try to keep abreast of information in relation to artificial intelligence in both education and beyond. And I likened it to, trying to drink from a fire hydrant through a straw that's not functioning very well. Maybe one of those paper, soggy paper straws. And I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that this is a technology that is going through such exponential development and change that none of us can ever expect to be across everything. And the best thing we can do is to stay constantly curious and constantly connected with one another, having conversations about artificial intelligence. So it's a fantastic opportunity that Teaching Council is offering us here today. And it's also really important that we lean into the opportunities to connect to the wider communities. So, of course, there's places like Disrupt Ed, and I know Tim Gander and Brendan Shaw and a few of the others are creating things like the AI in Education Community of Practice, which I'll get Kim to send the information about. That group that I know is developing, and also there's things like Tim and Brendan's very good report, AI in Education 2023. So I don't pretend to be covering absolutely everything, but let's go on and dip our toes into some of the history and the background and overview of AI in education. So what is artificial intelligence? So we know it's a technology that enables computers and machines to simulate human intelligence and problem-solving capability, either on its own or combined with other technologies, e.g. sensors, geolocation, robotics. AI can perform tasks that would otherwise require human intelligence or intervention. Things like digital assistants, GPS guidance, autonomous vehicles, generative AI tools like OpenAI's ChatGPT are just a few examples of AI in the daily news and our daily lives. And it's becoming very quickly apparent that AI isn't something we just consciously use. It's actually increasingly something that is woven into pretty much all of the platforms that we are using online. And part of AI is this concept of machine learning. And so when we talk about computers and machine learning, we can talk about supervised learning or unsupervised learning. So AI is based on processing a whole lot of data. So supervised learning is where the machine is given input data and corresponding output data. So a really simple example of that might be that you feed it a picture of a cat and you tell them that relates to the word cat. And then you might do the same with dog and a picture of a dog and the word dog. And that supervised learning enables the machine to quickly learn patterns and to recognize similar patterns. And it continues to predict likely correct output data. As we know, it's not always 100% correct, but we know that it improves very, very quickly. And then in machine learning, we have what's called unsupervised learning. And this is where the machine is given a whole lot of input data, but is not given the output data. So a whole lot of raw information. The machine identifies relationships within that information and data and looks for patterns and trends. And so if we think about things like predictive text, that would be an example of that. And then we have self-supervised, which is a bit of an offshoot of unsupervised learning and machine learning. And that's where the unsupervised learning of something like ChatGPT is fine-tuned to improve upon the specific functions. And recently, a friend of mine introduced me to teachergpt.co.nz. So that is an offshoot of ChatGPT that has been trained to, and I mean, again, if the developer of this platform is on the call today, I apologize if I'm making up how it works, but my understanding of it is that something like teachergpt.co.nz can use all that raw data, but it's also been trained with things like the New Zealand curriculum, NCEA data, and increasingly te reo and tikanga. And that means that when you use something like teachergpt.co.nz, it's going to have an increased chance of giving you the appropriate outputs if you are trying to do things in a New Zealand education context. So that's a link that I'll ask Kim to share when she sends out the email tomorrow. It might be one of those platforms that you might be interested in exploring. And but it's really important to highlight that AI isn't new. So whilst it's become really prevalent, particularly in the last few years, and particularly in the last couple of years with things like ChatGPT, it's really important to learn that it actually has a long history. And actually, we also need to acknowledge the woman that was an important part of the history of artificial intelligence. Ada Lovelace, who lived from 1815 to 1852, is considered by some as the mother of artificial intelligence. Admittedly, she didn't invent artificial intelligence as we know it today, because she is a precursor to this. But she did collaborate with another person, Charles Babbage, on something called the analytical machine. And there was a paper that came out about that machine at the time. And it is believed that her English translation of that paper and the notes therein are considered by many. There was a table that was included in that. She was a fantastic mathematician. And there was a table that was included that is seen by many as potentially the first computer program. And actually, it's some of the thinking that Ada Lovelace had in that paper that is picked up on in 1950 by Alan Turing, who is famous for both his work as a World War I doing the Enigma code in World War I, but he is also famous for what is referred to as the Turing test. And Ada Lovelace made a comment in one of her papers about the analytical engine and saying that the analytical engine is not a creator of entirely original work. And that was something that sparked Alan Turing's thinking when he wrote his famous paper, Can Machines Think? And then from there on, he is famous for a test known as a Turing test, where a human interrogator would try to distinguish between a computer, and human text response. And whilst this test has undergone much scrutiny since it was published, it remains an important part of history of AI, as well as an ongoing concept within the philosophy as it utilizes the ideas around linguistics. And I think the Turing test is a really interesting thing for us to consider now when we think about where we've already got to with things like ChatGPT, with things like virtual assistants who are becoming much, much harder for us to distinguish. And we'll see an example, hopefully in a video later on, if it works, which looks at some of the Khan Academy and the ChatGPT-4 technology, which has very naturalistic human voices going on within it. And it'll be interesting to see what would and wouldn't pass the Turing test at this stage. Anyway, I digress. We shall move on. So 1956, we've got John McCarthy. He coins the term artificial intelligence and the first ever AI conference. So, you know, this meeting that we're having today isn't a new idea. These conferences have been going on for some time already. And then, of course, we've got a number of really important developments, things like Deep Blue, which is the famous example of AI beating the world chess champion in 1997. And then we, of course, have got examples like IBM Watson. So it's really important to note that whilst AI has exploded in the last couple of years, AI isn't in itself a new technology. It is one that has been tinkering along and developing for many, many years already. So if we skip ahead to 2024, there is an absolute explosion in generative AI tools that are being used at the moment. You know, and most of you will be familiar with ChatGPT, but if you look at the slide here, you will notice that there's probably another 40, 45 that you're yet to discover. And there are some tools that are being developed specifically for education, but there is a daily proliferation of tools being developed right across the board as people trying to jump on the train. And I think it's interesting and important to keep abreast of these things. I don't think we need to waste our energy and our time to be across every single one of them, but it's worth getting onto communities to try and make sure that we keep a pace at some of the education-specific AI tools as well. And I think it's important to point out that ChatGPT is by far and away at the forefront of AI and AI use, generative AI use at the moment. So it's the tool that popularized the notion of generative AI worldwide, surpassing the threshold of 100 million users in just 2 months. ChatGPT, a little less than a year and a half after its launch, the application from OpenAI remains by far the most widely used tool in the world, with over 1.5 billion monthly unique visits. And its closest competitor at the time of writing these notes, and they may well have changed already, are things like Gemini, Google's solution, which was formerly known as Bard. But that has about 5 times fewer users, although it may catch up. But there is a whole lot of different companies coming into that space. But now if we look more specifically at AI in education, we see that we have this credible opportunity of automating administrative staffs, freeing teachers to focus on teaching and personalized interactions with students, enhancing rather than replacing human-led teaching. AI applications in education, we need to ensure that they're collaboratively designed and with equity and focus, and making sure that we're addressing those disparities across various demographics and ensuring accessibility for all students. Beyond using AI tools for education purposes, it's crucial to educate students about AI itself, including how to develop AI technologies and understand their potential risks. So we do, you know, this is Pandora's box. Pandora's box isn't just open, it's blowing apart. And there's no point avoiding this. I think we need to embrace it with both hands, embrace it with curiosity, and make sure that we're doing what we can to be part of the development and the adoption of these things. Don't let it happen to us. Don't let it happen to our young people without our guidance on the side. So achieving success with AI in education, there's a whole lot of things that we can do. So supporting teachers' role through augmentation and automation. This is what we're aiming for. The global teacher shortage and the New Zealand teacher shortage poses a real challenge to improving educational outcomes with the demands for educators projected to surge in the coming years. Integrating AI into education can streamline administrative tasks, giving teachers more time for meaningful student engagement. And by automating routine duties and emphasizing human-centric teaching, which is what we care about, we can create an environment where educators can thrive, creating richer learning experience. However, teaching involves more than imparting information, and we have a real responsibility to make sure that AI augments and doesn't replace the teacher's role. We want to really harness this technology. We've also got the opportunity to refine assessment and analytics in education. And I think we've got the opportunity to really lean into the concept of assessment for learning and powering up how we use information by getting AI to help us with the assessing of learners in real time. So the integration of AI in education holds promise in revolutionizing the assessment and analytics landscape. AI-enabled assessments offer educators invaluable insights, from pinpointing learning trends to supporting the evaluation of non-standardized tests. And so by leveraging AI capabilities, we can expedite that assessment process, offering timely feedback to learners and facilitating more focused engagement through real-time analysis. Educators can identify strengths and weaknesses in student performance, allowing for targeted instructional strategies. So we don't just want this to be a secretarial AI assistant for teachers. We want to make sure that we are using it to help with assessment for learning. We do also need to think about AI and digital literacy. Shout out, one of my hats is NetSafe Director. It is Net Safety Week this week. I remind you that NetSafe has a kete for educators, and it also has a fantastic module on there for teachers who want to upskill about AI themselves. So make sure you check that out. But many education systems struggle to address the growing digital skills gap, crucial for students' employability and ethical tech use. Bridging this gap is imperative to cultivate an AI-ready workforce. And AI presents an avenue where students can improve digital literacy, critical thinking and problem solving and creativity, preparing learners for future job demands. Integrating AI into education through traditional or innovative methods is key to shaping tomorrow's workforce. But that will only happen if we design for it and we make sure that happens. We can also use it to personalize learning, content, and experience. This is our opportunity, people, to power up universal design for learning. Extensive research confirms that individual tutoring significantly boosts learning outcomes, with tutoring students consistently outperforming 98% of their peers in traditional classroom settings. However, providing personalized tutoring for every student poses a major economic challenge. Here is our potential solution. We may be able to access those personal tutors that could make real differences for our students. AI offers a solution to this hurdle. By harnessing AI, we can now tailor the learning experience to individuals, enhancing academic performance while seamlessly catering to diverse learning needs. Customizable interfaces emerge as invaluable assets, particularly benefiting our neurodiverse students and those with diverse learning needs and physical abilities. There's platforms like Diffit that have been designed to help us with this. There's also Vercel, VERCEL, which AI, and a number of other platforms that are coming through. I'm sure Klaris will touch on this as well. So lots of opportunities. We also need to make sure that as we build on the lessons learned, it's clear that new developments in AI may provide much needed innovation in education. To make sure that these new technologies fulfill their potential to enhance Education 4.0 and lifelong learning, we need to deploy them strategically and safely, taking into account the following factors. So Education 4.20 is the industrial revolution that we're teaching in at the moment. So we are living and experiencing one of the biggest industrial revolutions of all time. And Education 4.0 is regarded as the fourth industrial revolution, which has the power to transform the future of ed through advanced technology and automation. People, we are living in the most important period of educational history, and it's on us to harness this opportunity. But we need to make sure that we're doing the following things. We need to design for equity. We need to recognize AI's potential to exacerbate current education gaps. AI-enabled education innovations must prioritize equity in their design. And that means addressing disparities between genders, public and private schools, as well as catering to children with diverse abilities and learning styles while removing language and access barriers. It is a social justice issue. Access to AI and effective use of AI is a social justice issue that we cannot ignore. It needs to enhance human-led pedagogy. This isn't about replacing us or us becoming lazy potato teachers who just use ChatGPT. We need to make sure that it doesn't replace high-quality human-led pedagogy. And to that end, most examples feature on enhancing human-led teaching by providing the right AI tools that automate clerical tasks and alleviate teachers' time to focus on their craft, or providing relevant training about AI skills that help them better deliver lessons in AI. We need to co-design and implement with supporting stakeholders. We need to be doing this in partnership. So we aren't doing this. We're not an island that's coming up with all of the answers. We need to be working with our teachers, parents, educational institutions, to adopt emerging technologies. Successful instances of AI integration in education underscore the importance of collaboratively designed educational solutions with input from students, teachers, and experts. And it must be a collaborative, multi-stakeholder approach. And that also begs the question in a bicultural country like New Zealand. I think we need to be thinking from the get-go about te tiriti and what a te tiriti-led approach to AI might be in our school. And how do we make sure that we are using this to close the gap for our Māori and our Pasifika learners and our learners that may not be reaching the targets that we want. It is on us to make sure that happens. And number 4, teaching about AI is equally crucial to teaching with AI. So we can't just use the tool, we need to teach about the tool. And so AI tools, e.g. those that provide data analytics and gamified learning, have long been part of the education landscape, while developments in generative AI offer new opportunities to leverage AI tools. It becomes increasingly evident that teaching about AI in schools is vital. This education should prioritise imparting skills related to AI development and understanding its political risks. These skills are critical for shaping future talent capable of developing ethically designed tools that benefit economies and societies. We don't have to be the experts. We can find that information and connect our students to it. But we do need to be front-footing education around this and supporting our families, actually, and our whānau to be having conversations at home as well. And then, of course, there's the economic viability. Those of you on the call who know me know that one of my favorite soapbox items is closing the digital divide. And now more than ever, I think it is imperative that we close the digital divide in Aotearoa. And that does not mean all young people being on devices all of the time, but it does mean every single young person in Aotearoa having access to a device and having the skills and the competencies and the confidence to engage with it critically when and if it's appropriate. I'm a huge believer in hybrid learning. I'm a huge believer in getting young people out into nature and connected with the real world. But we also must ensure that each and every young person has the skills and the competencies to effectively use artificial intelligence. Otherwise, we are leaving them behind and we are doing them an absolute disservice. That could be another whole topic all on its own, but it is something that I'm really passionate about. Anyway, I always think I'm never going to have much to talk about and I'm going to struggle to fill my time. And then I get partway through these presentations and I realize that Claire is waffling on for too long already. So we will power through. these slides. So the pros and cons on AI in education. We know some of the pros. So we have the opportunity to harness personalized learning. It can revolutionize education if we learn how to use it effectively, making sure experiences are personalized for students. But we do need to have access to the right resources, and we do need to have the confidence and skills. It can increase efficiency. It can automate administrative tasks and grading and marking, and it can help us out in many ways. It can enhance accessibility. AI can bridge the accessibility gap in education. Assistive technologies can be that much easier for our young people to access. And for those students with disabilities or learning diverse can be supported. And of course, that means improved personalization. And if all of that is done well, hopefully it should also be improving student engagement, because we can contextualize and personalize. We know we are staring down the barrel of an increasingly standardized, prescribed syllabus coming our way. And I think the way that we are going to make sure that that doesn't become a one-size-fits-all solution is leaning into the technology and the AI to make sure that those skills, topics, knowledge is still being personalized and contextualized for our young people. So AI is going to become a powerful tool to ensure that we're still being really creative in our classroom. And then, of course, there are cons. We do need to be mindful about the privacy and security concerns. We do need to think about what we're giving away, but I think we need to also weigh up the pros and cons. So, of course, thinking about how we use personal data when we're using generative AI is an important thing. We do need to make sure AI never replaces us, and it never replaces the relationships. AI can't replace the emotional and social connections that are essential to learning and development. AI should actually be utilized to make space for better personal connections and what have you. And we've got to think about the ethical considerations. Bias and fairness are pressing ethical considerations when implementing AI. When you're using ChatGPT, there is undoubtedly bias built into it. It is like the bottom trawling tool. It's scraping data off the internet. And if bias exists in that data, bias is going to exist in the stuff that comes out of that. So we need to be thinking about how we might counter that bias that exists within it. There was an incredible article in the Spin-off the other day that talked about the power being used. There was an estimation that the amount of power used to develop something like a generative AI picture might actually be the equivalent of charging a mobile phone. And the weird thing is they don't even know where the power is being used, because it's dipping into, farms and data banks and server farms all over the world. And we don't know the impact. There's also the black box aspect to AI. Even computer scientists don't know what's going on inside the machine once the machine starts teaching itself. How much of that sort of Terminator type stuff are we comfortable with living with? There is also, of course, the potential for job losses. Will administrative tasks be lost as a result of this? Hopefully not, but it could be. And there is also the idea that there's this dependence on technology. I often reflect on the fact that I'm really lucky as an old person, oldish, age 50, that I was lucky enough to be educated pre a lot of this technology. And so I have got really robust foundational skills in terms of my literacy and my numeracy, my cursive handwriting. Actually, my cursive handwriting is a bit rubbish. But, I have a whole lot of foundational skills that I am now augmenting with technology. We potentially have a generation of young people that, if we don't keep that balance, will actually be lacking some of the foundational skills. They don't necessarily need to have our model of education from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, but I do think it's on us to ensure that we don't have overdependence on technology. I'm going to be done pretty quickly, because I've realized that I'm going to try and show you the Khan Academy example, which I think is an exciting example of what is possible, and hopefully technology is on our side and the video will play for us. I wanted to show you this because it shows you where we're at the moment. What is important to remember is the AI that you use today is probably the worst version of AI you will ever use. So AI is improving and learning and evolving at such a rapid rate that everything is getting better and better. And that's awesome, but it's also potentially means that there may be an over-reliance that comes with it as well. It'll be interesting to see where the future might take us. So I've got an example of Khan and the work that they're doing with ChatGPT-4, an example of what is actually possible already in terms of personal tutors for students. So fingers crossed, this may work. Oops.
Hi, my name is Sal Khan. I'm the founder of Khan Academy, and I'm also the author of a new book about artificial intelligence in education called Brave New Words. And OpenAI invited myself and my son Imran here to try out some of their new technology. And so we're curious about how good it might be at tutoring someone in math on Khan Academy. So let's get it started. It's loading up. All right, make sure it can see our screen.
Actually, in this format,
hello there. I'm here with my son, and I'd love you to tutor him on this math problem, but don't give him the answer. You can ask questions and nudge him in the right direction, but I really want to make sure he understands it himself. And he's here in the room, so you can talk to him directly.
Of course, I'd be happy to help. Let's look at the problem together. Can you first identify which sides of the triangle are the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse relative to angle alpha?
All right, so I'm pretty sure this is the angle alpha right here, right?
Perfect. That's correct. Now, looking at the triangle, which side do you think is the hypotenuse?
Really,
Remember the hypotenuse?
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be this one, but I really am not sure. This side AC.
You're close. Actually, side AC is called the adjacent side to the angle alpha. The hypotenuse is the longest side of a right triangle and is directly opposite the right angle. Can you find which one is the hypotenuse?
Oh, okay, I see. So I think the hypotenuse is this really long side from A to B. Would that be correct?
Exactly. Well done. Now that you've identified the hypotenuse, can you identify which side is the opposite side to angle alpha?
Okay, well, I mean, you told me earlier that this was the adjacent side, and I know that's the hypotenuse, so I'm guessing that this side, BC, is the opposite side.
Great deduction. That's absolutely correct. Now that you've identified all the sides relative to angle alpha, do you remember the formula for finding the sine of an angle in a right triangle?
Yeah, I know that the sine is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse.
Perfect. That's absolutely right. Now, can you apply that formula to find side alpha in the triangle using the lengths of the sides that we've identified?
Okay, so, I mean, you told me that 7, this side BC, is the opposite side. And then you said that the hypotenuse is the longest side, so that would be this side AB, which is 25. So would the answer be 7 over 25?
Excellent work. That's correct. Sine alpha equals 7 over 25. You did a great job identifying the sides and using the sine formula. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask.
So there you have it. And that it's important to note that wasn't an act. Like that woman's voice wasn't an actor. It was ChatGPT 4.0 in the naturalistic way that it can actually speak to a student. You will have seen the Khan Migo AI assistant advert that popped up in the video. This is the sort of stuff that is already accessible for our young people. And if we see this as an opportunity for us to not just have AI as an administrative tool or something that helps us with our teacher design. This could potentially mean every student in your class has its own personalized tutor that could support them in their learning while you moved around and supported people in different ways. We don't want to be overly reliant on it, but it is already possible for our students to have that AI tutor. Now, this part I'm going to skip through because I know that Klaris is going to talk to you about artificial intelligence and what we're doing at Albany Senior High School. So I am not going to go through these in any real detail because this is stuff that I know Klaris will cover for you anyway. But I just will highlight this because this is something that I'm really passionate about. Our approach to AI is all about exploration and curiosity. And we need to accept that it's here to stay. We need to embrace the potential. We need to start rethinking assessment even before NZQA does. We need to give teachers sandpit time and professional learning time. And I think we need to get on and do it. So I will just remind you again about the report that Tim Gander and Brendan Shaw have published, AI in Education 2023. And that was interesting in highlighting that at present, still the majority of teachers have not had any AI in education PD. Well done, you're in some right now. But we need to make sure that every single school is actually providing that professional development support, providing that sandpit time for their teachers. I think it's really, really important. And again, I'll get Kim to share their AI and Education Community of Practice platform that is available for teachers to join as well. This stuff I'll skip through because Clarissa's talking to you all about all of this stuff. But this is the stuff that I will close on because this is what I am concerned about as a school leader. I'm really concerned that this is all happening at a time in New Zealand where we've got yet another change in government, yet another refresh of our curriculum refresh. It's a time when we're seeing implementation of structured literacy. We've probably got our more structured approach to mathematics coming through. We've got an hour of reading, writing, and mathematics. If you're in secondary school, we're awaiting the NCA review of the already reviewed level 1, and we're awaiting changes at level 2 and level 3. We're also wrangling with co-requisites and what have you. I'm worried that the overcrowded educational landscape means that AI is easy to be ignored or sidelined, particularly by your school leaders. And we need to make sure that is not happening. I also am worried that people try to ban it because they think that's the easier way to manage it in terms of assessment and what we're doing. And that they can't see the wood for the trees. Like, we are in it, people. We are living it, and we need to make sure that we're wrangling it. And therefore, if leaders aren't embracing it, teachers won't be supported to reduce their workload and enhance their ability to provide for more inclusive teaching and learning. And this is compounding the digital divide. We need to make sure that all young people have access to this and all teachers have access to it. And if it's not embraced, who will teach our students to use it critically and highlight things like implicit bias and algorithmic echo chambers? Who's going to support our young people to use AI for good? And if we don't evolve assessment, it will become exhausting and ultimately a futile game of plagiarism whack-a-mole. It is on us to do as Kerry Facer says. We need to recognise the future, and the future of education and AI in education is not something that is done to us. It's an ongoing process in which we can intervene, and we must. So people, my closing message to you all is stay curious. Try and drink from that fire hydrant of information. You know, if nothing else, have a party in the water and just let it rain down. But make sure you stay in that space. Stay curious. Be a learner. Create, if anything, nothing else, create sandpit time for your teachers. Or if you're a teacher, create sandpit time for your students and make sure they are having the opportunity to engage with it and do so critically. So thank you once again for joining me this afternoon. I apologize for going a little bit over time, but it's been a real privilege to have the conversation with you. Please keep the conversation going. Come over and join us on Disrupt Ed. Make sure you enjoy that AI and Education Community of Practice. I think this is a conversation we have only just begun. Kia ora and thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. I've made some notes. Your lifelong commitment to education, learners, teachers, and also to all things technology and AI just shone through your presentation. Thank you so much for telling us and giving us that chance to recognise that we need to take the opportunity to learn and engage from the educator's perspective that you've given us today. It is my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Klaris Philipson. At Albany Senior High School, Klaris is responsible for specialist subject curriculum leadership, e-learning and information technology systems, and she's the principal's nominee. With a master's in education and information technology, she has devoted her teaching and educational leadership career to ensuring students and teachers benefit through the advances in and uses of technology in the classroom.
Kia ora te whānau, welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Ko maunga whao te maunga, ke te noho aho, ke tamaki makaurau, ko Philipson toko whānau, ko Richard taku tāne, ko Paige roa, ko Peyton oku tamahine, he tumaki tuarua ki te kura o oku kura matua, ko Klaris toku ingoa, tēnā koutou katoa. And if anyone in a few moments notices, I have an Australian accent, so please bear with me. I do speak Kiwi as much as possible. The things I'd love to cover, and picking up from where Claire finished off, is looking at the work that the ministry has put in and how Albany Senior have taken the ministry's directives and how we're focusing on it and our position. I wanted to share with you some of the use cases, so the way that our staff and our students are engaging with AI in various forms and the ways that we've started to utilise it. And then at the end, if we've got time, I have some other tools that we have shared with our teachers recently. So as Claire said, make space for the staff to engage with it and have a chance to play with the AI. Now, we know that technology has been around and has always been a concern, and there was many years ago where we worried about the authenticity of student work when Wikipedia launched and the concerns that we had around the implications of that for student learning. And this is just another one of those tools that we have to learn to work around, to work with, to utilise in ways that benefit the learning, but also educate our young people on how to use them effectively. As Claire has explained so thoroughly, it was great that AI is basically an algorithm. It's a series of, as a program that's written to produce a very specific outcome. And when we talk about it being generative or regenerative, it's basically developing and expanding its own algorithms based on the work that it's doing. But it will only ever produce what it's designed to do. So based on what those initial algorithms are, different programs will have different purposes and meet different needs. And so the way that they're used and the way that they function will be slightly different. Some of the things that we've heard in many of the education spaces is that it could replace that genuine effort that students put in, and that raises that real concern around plagiarism and the authenticity of student work. So we have to be able to work with our teachers and support them in understanding the tools, and then working with those students to make sure that we're not putting a barrier in place where these tools could actually benefit our students and see them progress and have much more success. Some of the things that these young people in front of us are so au fait with different software tools, and particularly with the apps that are on their phone. But if we compare, the time that it took for Snapchat and Instagram to grow to the number of 100 million users than what ChatGPT did, their use and their engagement with that tool was so much faster than the ones that many of them still use. Snapchat and Instagram are still the major ones that most students are using in our schools in those higher levels. But the growth rate of ChatGPT just shows us that those tools are so natural to them, and we need to make sure that we are keeping up with that. Returning to pen and paper is never going to be an option for the way that education is progressing. The tools that we've been using in our schools, things like Education Perfect, even eAstal and Mathletics that have been around for many, many years, have had elements of AI built into those systems. They just were never termed AI at the time. The fact that a student could complete a piece of work that was assigned by the teacher, and then the system would then predict what next questions would be suitable to continue to develop that student. That's AI in its infancy and the way it was used at that time. And that's tools that we've already had. The ministry, in their wisdom, have produced some really good things for teachers to consider and schools to consider. And the link is on the website, but you can just Google Ministry of Education and Generative AI. The things that they are asking us to be mindful of, depending on the age group of students that you work with, many tools will actually have age restrictions on them. And so checking those things and making sure that your teachers and the parents, if you're going to engage your students with them, are aware of those considerations. We're lucky in the context that we only have year 11, 12 and 13. So we have young adults that we work with, and many of these tools are already accessible for them. They're the 13 years and over. The large language models can be unreliable, and they will compile text what looks convincing, but they do not necessarily understand all that they've created. There's a term called hallucinations that's used around AI and some of the pieces of writing and the things that it will produce. It will draw on elements of known history, but if you ask it to retell a story, it will sometimes make up components and put extra parts into a historical story that are in fact not factual at all. And that's where the hallucinations come from. Waiting for the next slide. There we go. They may ask us to not use AI to make decisions about learners' work. There are so many tools out there that are AI checkers, essentially, that you can run a piece of students' writing through, and it will then try and predict how much of it has been written by AI. Some of them may appear to work very well, but we have already had instances where students' authenticity of work has been called into question because one of those AI checkers has flagged a lot of the work, and then using the other tools that we have at our teachers' disposal, we've been able to verify that it was in fact student work. So there are really things to be mindful about if you're going to start to look for ways to verify that authenticity, that a lot of those tools aren't going to provide you with the answers that you think they might. Just said that. I'm going to skip that slide. Here we go. So what have we done at Albany Senior? Middle of last year, I started looking at a variety of the AI tools and looking at the ways that we could possibly be prepared for what might come. And I started putting together our philosophy or our approach to using those AI tools and assistive technology. So assistive technology is a slightly different camp. It's things like Grammarly and Google Read and Write, which have elements of AI in them, but their intent is it's a tool that will enhance and support the learning built into another piece of software. So that's where assistive technology is slightly different. But both of them are an essential thing for us to consider in ways to enable the greatest success for our young people within our school. So I had a draft, and we're gonna share the link to this document with everyone, which we refined last year. We spent time with all of our staff. Once I'd put together the initial thinking and SLT had a review of it, and we actually dedicated some time in end of year PD for all of our teachers to have input on this policy and the approach that we were going to take. Like anything, if you're going to have success with implementing something new or addressing an issue, having your staff on board and having them have a voice and input and buy-in means that you're going to have an element of greater success. The key philosophy for our approach was that all new tools, all new technology, we should always be looking to explore it and to understand how it might be used, and then look at the best ways to approach that. So that still underpins our approach to AI and AT, and that's the philosophy we take with every piece of technology. We defined what the two types of tools were so that when we're working with our young people, they understand the difference between the two types of technology that we're talking about. And then we also unpacked the different opportunities for them and got feedback from our teachers of what they see the biggest potential risks being around the use of these tools. And then we tried to address them through putting down 3 key areas where we've very strategically considered what the implication is and then what the actions are that as a school we could take, or the approach that we want to take, looking at our teaching and learning, looking at how we are using those tools to support our learners. And then finally, which was a big part for our staff around NCEA, was ensuring authenticity of work and the way that we can use AI to support the growth and development of our learners and have it not impede the authenticity of the work that we do with them. So some of the use cases, the things that we have done and the ways that our teachers have started utilising not just ChatGPT, but other different tools as well. So the ways that they've engaged with it, and these we asked our staff for example. So these are true class examples of what our teachers have done. They've looked for or asked ChatGPT how they could contextualize a topic to try and make it more accessible. So why would year 11s or level 1s care about quadratic equations? And so they put that in as a prompt, and ChatGPT gave them some examples of why it might be interesting to those young people. Some teachers have started using it as the digital expert in the room. So rather than the 3 before me, there's a 3 before me and see ChatGPT as well. So you can use that as an additional source of information or problem solving. And then they've asked it to generate questions on particular pieces of writing, a sample, an article. And there are so many tools now that will actually do that in a really efficient and effective way. But that was an early example of how they used ChatGPT last year. They asked it to generate exemplars for ideas when students get stuck. They asked it to improve writing students, which was a real writing skills, for students. It was a really interesting use where the students wrote a paragraph and then they put it in to ask ChatGPT to write a similar paragraph, and then they had to compare the two. I thought that was a really powerful use for our English teachers. They used it as a writing prompt for students, and then they could use it to verify against the criteria for a task, and asked it to look at the rubric and measure whether or not it had met that criteria. Our students have used it in a variety of different ways, coming up with funny names for a business. So our business studies class all hopped on and had a go at that, and then used a different form of AI generative stuff to look at logos and image design and things that went with that idea that they had. They've asked it to provide them with a breakdown of how could I approach solving this problem, which was really good. That was part of our impact project, which we do on a Wednesday, our student-driven and student-led project time. So that one of the groups asked it to do that. And then in one of our other impact hubs, the students had written a script for a film. They had done a first scene, and then we asked it to generate a second scene based on the scenario with some criteria. And that was the example there. So right at the ending where the protagonist actually fails. So that's been really interesting to watch how our teachers have used it for their own teaching practice and the things that they're developing for themselves, but also how they're choosing to then support the young people to engage with it in ways that will benefit the projects and the learning that they're doing, that isn't having it rewrite the essay for them. At an SLT level, there's one main way that we've gone about using it quite readily, and I'll run through a scenario with you. But anytime we gather any feedback in student voice, we don't just use the multi-choice. We always have an opportunity for some other types of open feedback with open questions, and that can often be the most difficult ones to synthesize because you have so many different statements from students. And the old school method would be that we'd go through with our highlighter And then we would try and identify patterns ourselves. We might have 6 different colored highlighters, and we'd have different threads that we'd be highlighting going through this text. And so we decided that we would give ChatGPT a go at how it could possibly synthesize some of this work or some of the voice that we had gathered. So we decided on some really simple question. So it was, could you give me a rank order of the themes that appear in this text from most often to least? So I copied all the student voice in one question, put that into ChatGPT with this prompt, and it then pulled out what it thought were the themes from that. Now, initially, it's not the most useful information, so you then have to reprompt and ask additional questions. And then it's, what are the top 5 themes that are most mentioned? And then it gave me a much more purposeful set of answers with a much more discrete responses. So it then went and picked out what those key things were and told me why it had ranked them in that order. So as a way of synthesizing large amounts of student voice, that has been really invaluable for us. We've also taken it beyond just SLT using it in that method when our teachers are doing their professional inquiries and they gather student voice around the interventions that they've put in place, or they're looking to gauge whether something that they're wanting to try might be useful to the students. We've encouraged them to do exactly the same thing and use this approach to synthesizing some of that student voice. And we did, so obviously in this example, there were 2 separate questions. So I did exactly the same process for the 2. What we did on Wednesday, this Wednesday, we have dedicated professional learning time. And the Wednesday just gone last week, we dedicated the entire hour for our staff to explore either ChatGPT if they hadn't started to work with it, or I'd gathered a variety of other tools that either support teachers around the work that they're doing with their young people and how they're ensuring authenticity, or exploring other AI tools that have come through the different education groups, education forums that I'm part of, that people are talking about and using out there. So one that a lot of our staff are using is actually a Google Chrome extension. It's called Draftback. And so if they are wanting to look at the authenticity of student work and the time frame it's been worked on, the development of it, how much work has been done over different time, over a time period, this not only can you look at it in the version history, which Google always has, Draftback does it as a video. So you can see the playback of the development of that piece of work. And a lot of our teachers use that as one of the tools that supports them when they're working with the young people in their class. This one we looked at with our art department, really enjoyed playing with this. It's been termed photography, and I've put the word down the bottom there, in that it's AI's generation of photorealistic images. And there was lots of stuff in the media a little while ago around the photo of Kate and the children, and I think it was Louis had a couple of extra fingers. So it's an interesting tool for young people to play with, but our staff really enjoyed putting prompts in and having it generate different images to meet that prompt. The other one they liked was the image to image. So you can upload an image and then ask it to modify, to add or to vary elements. And it has different genres. So our art team were uploading a piece of student work and then asking it to turn it into a cartoon style or turn it into an anime style. And so they were playing with the way that it can then generate different pieces of art for young people to use as stimulus or to look through. I think the next one might be one that Claire mentioned. Oh, no, not yet. I'm not up to DFIT yet. Parlay is a great one for discussion, and you can do face-to-face discussion board, or you can do digital online discussions. You can ask it, you can provide it with a prompt or a question, and then it can generate the discussion questions for you. It's amazing that you can put in resources like a YouTube video, and it will then create a transcript and then also give you, some of the key points from it then can be used. This one I had some staff playing with, which is around generating quizzes. And again, you can put in any stimulus material that you like, and then it will generate drag and drop multiple choice questions, and you can use them either in the digital space, or you could turn them into different types of class activities with it. And so I'd put in a prompt, what are good habits for teens to sleep well. And so it then generated a variety of different stimulus for us. As Claire mentioned also, Gemini is the Google version of their AI platform. It will be integrated into all the different elements of the Google education space. So, Google Docs will have a prompt available where you can ask for help. If any of us have been teaching for a while, where Clippy was around in Microsoft Word, and you used to be able to ask him, how do I format these things? I suppose Google AI and Gemini is the more advanced version of that, because it will function across all the different parts of the Google education domain. The one catch is that it must be turned on and enabled by your domain admin. So it's not enabled by default. And so you would have to talk to your admins about that. One thing that happened a little while ago, there was a symposium, not similar to this, but done and held by, where NZQA collated a variety of different speakers and talked about assessment in the age of AI. And if you're interested in knowing more, we'll make sure that this link comes out to you, because there's a series of webinars that you can just watch over time and engage with, because I found that a really good start point when I started exploring all of these things and deciding what the implications were for our kura and how we would approach it with our staff. Some of the key advice that we've given to our teachers that you can consider when you're looking at it, the impact and the implications for your own school, is how we actually manage the assessment, the type of tasks that we ask our young people to do, and the ways that we ask them to respond. So not necessarily always having written responses, making use of that flexibility that NCEA gives us, so that we can get that personal voice from the students and ensure that they're working in authentic ways. We have worked with our staff on many, many years, but the philosophy is to always be alongside that young person, to know where they're at, to know them as a person, to have checkpoints along the way so that you can monitor their progress towards achievement. That reduces any potential for there to be a challenge or question around the authenticity. If you've been able to monitor and work with those students over time, you will know the progress, you'll know where they're at. And then if all of a sudden a very big, beautifully written essay appears and you haven't seen that develop over time, then you're already in a good position to be able to ask purposeful questions with that young person to check where that knowledge and where that learning has come from and where it's happened. Knowing what a baseline is for each student, knowing what work you've seen them produce before helps you also make that judgment. I think as a senior leader of a school, it's really important that you can have a process where you can look at the implications of AI and the link to assessment practice. I think also being the PN in my school has helped in that I've been able to look at and marry up those two things, but making sure that there is definitely a plan in place is really important. Dedicate some time to PD. For most staff, they are time poor, and if it's a priority for you as a senior leadership team or as a kura to ensure that your staff are well aware of what the implications are, what the tools are, what the options are, what the opportunities are for the use of that, you need to dedicate some time to it. And we have done some last term. We have another workshop this term, again, dedicated to looking at AI and the implications. So prioritizing it is always going to see greater gains in your staff. And then using data and AI generated insights, it's something that we have found really invaluable in looking at raw data, but also taking that student voice and using it and having AI help us synthesize it has been a lifesaver. So before we go out to the breakout rooms, I think it's also just really important to flag, like Claire said, our teachers are so overloaded. There is so much going on, and that sometimes you do need to make sure that there's a balance and set a priority. It may not be this year that you're able to engage with that, but knowing that it's on the horizon and knowing that it's been thought about and knowing that there will be time given to it, I think will allow staff to feel that you as a leadership team or as a school are aware of what's going on for them, but also continue to focus on what the changing landscape of education in New Zealand looks like. Thank you kindly. That concludes what I had to share, and I'm sure there's a question after that, I think, and I'll hand back to Kim.
Klaris, thank you so much. For me, I really appreciated the fact that you gave us some real examples where the teaching was apparent and the human response was needed. This just wasn't just about students using ChatGPT to write an essay for them and all of those implications. The fact that you were able to give us so many real examples about how you use it still in that real way to make learning apparent and part of pedagogy was fantastic. And I also want to point out the fact that the messages that you gave around making space for staff was really great for teachers in the other sectors that aren't secondary, because some of our ECE and primary teachers might have been saying, oh yeah, that works really well in a secondary context. But the feedback that you were giving about the way you made space for your staff, getting the staff to address the risks and then looking at the approach, theming feedback, and that sandpit time to explore their professional learning. I think they were great messages that work no matter what your context for teaching. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I can't thank you everybody for attending today. As I said earlier, we know that numbers were limited about who could actually attend the session live. However, we should have the presentation on our website in the next few weeks. So if you would like to use this presentation with your staff, feel free to play it for them. We're going to make sure that we have some guiding questions that you could use with your staff to reflect upon the content of today's session. So keep an eye out for that one. Now, on the current slide, you'll be able to see that we do have 2 more presentations in this Symposia series. The next one happens on the 25th of September, and it focuses on applying generative AI technologies with professional expertise. So that's going to go a lot more into the code of professional responsibility and some of those other considerations that we need to make. So the QR code is there if you have your phone in front of you, because you're on your laptop and you can scan that to get through. If not, I will make sure that there is a link to how it is that you can sign up in the survey that you will get tomorrow, where we'll ask you how you've found today's Symposia. So again, I want to thank you so much for coming today and all of the great mahi that you do with your teachers in schools in Aotearoa and centres. Kua ea ki ronga, kua ea ki raro, I ronga whakarehia ki ronga tia tina. Tina, homie, huie, tai kie.